when things like R2 show up, it's franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek and The Martian have each led to real increases in our investment in engineering into space and in the future. So these aren't static things that are just responding to what engineers are doing. It's part of this whole cycle. Hey everybody, Adam Savage here, and I am in one of my favorite places in the whole world, the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. And we've done tons of videos from here over the years, but what you might not know is that the museum has been undergoing a massive renovation the last several years, updating both its facilities and also the galleries within those facilities. And a lot of it is coming to fruition very soon and in the near future. And one of the coolest things that is about to happen is this gallery, Futures in Space, opens in just 3 weeks, and it is a whole new gallery for the Smithsonian. This isn't just looking at where we've come from and the objects that tell the story of our ingenuity. This is the gallery looking at the future, where we are looking towards who's going to space, how we're getting to space. It is a beautiful room, and we're going to talk to some of the curators about how they built it. But I just wanted to give you an intro up front to talk about specifically how much pop culture is in this exhibit. Because pop culture and space engineering and aeronautics, they are not separate entities commenting on each other. They're part of a whole soup, and the Smithsonian understands that, and this gallery tells that story so beautifully. Let's talk to the curators. So Matt, tell me, let's do the top line. Why a Futures in Space gallery? What is this about?
Well, back when the National Air and Space Museum first opened its doors in 1976, people came here to see what was essentially what was happening right then in space and what could potentially be the future. So we have been a future-oriented museum since our beginnings. And we wanted, as we opened these new renovated galleries, to have a gallery that really spoke to the idea that, well, the future is still being charted. Right? And there's a lot more to come in space. And so the idea behind this gallery was that the things that are happening now, the things that, the discussions, the decisions, the people coming to the table, they're all going to chart the next future in space. And we called it futures plural because not only are there multiple futures that are possible from this point in time, but different people in different parts of the world will experience that future differently. And we all have our own individual visions of, what could or should happen in space. Like what would make us excited to see in space? Well,
and I think that's one thing that ordinary person thinking about futures in space would think that you'd end up seeing a lot of artifacts about design and engineering and iteration of what technologies are coming down the pike. And they might be surprised to walk in here and be confronted with tons of pop culture references. But they're part of a virtuous cycle, aren't they?
They are. And, the science fiction that we consume helps us to think about, what possibly could happen in the future. It inspires a lot of people to go into careers in aerospace engineering. It sets a lot of people on that path. But it also gives us a chance to explore, before those technologies even exist, what would be the significance of those technologies. So, we structured this gallery around the idea of the future, but the idea that, there are a set of questions that we should be asking, and that those questions get explored in, the technologies that are being developed today and the companies that are doing that work, but also through science fiction, through art, through culture. There are many ways that we think about what we're going to do in space, who's going to go to space, and why. What are our reasons for wanting to do more in space? When we opened the previous set of 8 galleries, the gallery I worked on there was Exploring the Planets. And Exploring the Planets tells the story of what we've already done, right? How we've explored the planets. And one of the things that we hadn't really been able to do or collect around was some of these more future-facing technologies that haven't yet accomplished something in space that maybe could. So, for example, we've got lots of robots behind me here.
Love robots.
That haven't actually yet done anything in space, except for the Mission Extension Vehicle that's right there. Otherwise, these are technologies that have been developed that haven't yet achieved their goals, but that represent things that people want to do with robots in space.
Amazing. And just to cover the elephant in the room, you guys are displaying my loan of my personal R2-D2.
Yeah, so R2-D2, I think, is a really important part of this story. He represents, the way we think about what the future of robotics could hold.
An idealized assistant partner.
Exactly, right? He can fix your spaceship, he can be your companion, and he can also navigate your X-Wing or whatever craft. So,
and he can complain, which means he has some real autonomy.
He has a personality, right? He's not as negative as Marvin, but he's definitely got an attitude. So, R2-D2 R2-D2 does. He has for many years represented for a lot of people what they think a robot in space should be capable of and what that robot could potentially look like or be like.
Tell me about this thing above R2 here.
Yeah, so that thing kind of looks like a basketball backboard, right?
Yeah.
What that actually is a prototype of the technology that they used, Northrop Grumman used on the mission extension vehicle that they designed. That's essentially, it's a way for giving older satellites an extended lifetime. So what it does is it uses that sort of harpoon structure in the center to dock with a satellite that was never designed to dock with anything.
Oh,
right?
So this is meant to attach to something no one's ever thought about attaching anything to.
So this is totally, aftermarket.
Yeah.
So if a company, contracts with Northrop Grumman to have this thing attached to their satellite, it does it with that harpoon-like mechanism, and then it essentially becomes the new fuel system for that satellite, because it's got engines and fuel, and it can keep that satellite in a workable, usable orbit for longer once that orbiter or that satellite maybe has run out of fuel or its engines don't work anymore, or for whatever reason, right? And then at the end of the contract, at the end of the actual lifetime of that satellite, it can then move the satellite into, another orbit. Deteriorating orbit where it will not be in the way of anything else. So that represents sort of the future of on-orbit servicing. Right? Actually being able to go and do things to existing satellites to extend their lives or get them out of the way.
This is really necessary. We have tens of thousands of pieces up
Low Earth orbit is getting crowded, so this is a good way of launching fewer satellites, getting more life out of the satellites that you have, but also then potentially moving things out of the way.
Matt, tell me about this little guy here, this rover.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember, but there was a thing called the Google Lunar XPRIZE, where multiple companies were trying to send spacecraft to the moon. And in order to win the XPRIZE, they had to, fulfill a few different parameters. And one of the companies that was competing was a Japanese company called iSpace. And they've been in the news a lot lately because they've been trying to land on the moon. They're a private company with, some support from the Japanese government, but primarily they're a private company trying to do this in the same way that other companies in the US and around the world are also. So, but this was the rover that they designed for that Google Lunar XPRIZE competition. It never flew to the moon, but they've been developing new generations of rovers like this kind of micro rover design that they could send to the moon on future missions, with the idea that, just like NASA and commercial companies here in the US have been trying to develop this sort of lunar economy, iSpace wants to participate in that lunar economy as well. And so they're developing landers and rovers that could do things for private paying customers.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of robots doing work for us on the moon, I think there's few things I can think of that seem more futuristic than a house on the moon. Nonetheless, you guys are displaying the idea of extraplanetary enclosures for humans.
So we have these touchable models that are over to the left, but then we have our walk-through habitat right here. That it's not actually 3D printed, but it's meant to sort of evoke that idea of the 3D printed Mars habitat. And when you walk into this habitat experience, what you actually experience is we interviewed 4 different people who have gone through these Mars analog experiments where they've lived in simulated Mars environments.
Oh, the sequestration experiments.
Exactly, right. So 4 of these folks, they went through different experiences, and we got them to talk about what it was like to, try to be human, right? In a simulated Mars. And the idea of how they could then project that out to thinking about what would it actually be like to live on Mars? What are the sort of human challenges? What's the human dimension of living on Mars? Not the technology you have to develop. I mean, the 3D printing is amazing stuff, but we really wanted to get inside their heads and have them tell us what it was like to actually, be there, trying to live for up to a year in these simulated environments.
What I found fascinating reading into accounts of the astronauts that went through these experiments was they weren't allowed to go out of the habitat without a suit on. And they all talked about how affectionate they ended up being about their suit, that it was this thing that protected them. And even though this is in some sense play, when you're doing real work and you have to do it under real restrictions, that work becomes very real very quickly.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things that we heard from them was because they lived in the habitat and could only go out in suits, one of the things they missed the most was like feeling the wind, feeling the air on them, right?
Oh, wow, yeah.
They never got fresh air.
Fascinating.
Right? And the sounds of nature and things like that. They're like, it feels so alien, even though you're still on Earth, to be living in these simulated environments. And so projecting that forward to folks living for 2 years or more on the surface of Mars, right? Just think about being cut off from all of your daily experiences, like all of those little bits of nature and the friends and random encounters with people, right? You're not getting that at all anymore.
Like, and if you don't like the delay on your cell phone, imagine it being 7 to 21 minutes.
Exactly.
And also, this is red because the idea is that when we get to other planets, we may use the material we find there, in situ resource utilization, to print our habitats that will protect us.
Exactly, right? So there are multiple ways of building houses on another planet. You can bring things with you, but if the more you bring with you, the more weight you're bringing, the more fuel you need, the longer your journey gets, everything. So if you can come up with technologies like 3D printing or other forms of in situ resource utilization, then you can cut down on that weight and the cost and everything else, and make it potentially easier on yourself. And who knows? You could even potentially send robots ahead to do the work before you even get there.
Emily, I love that you open this gallery asking the big questions. Tell me about these questions and how you guys came up with them.
Absolutely. Well, we know that a gallery about the future, it's precarious, right? You could be wrong. We're not here to make predictions. But one thing that we can say with certainty is that how these core questions are answered today determines what happens in the future. So this gallery is organized around 3 core questions. Who goes to space? Why should we go to space? And what should we do there?
Amazing. And so you open right here with the who, that first question.
Exactly. And so we try to answer this question of who goes to space in 2 ways. We try to tell that from the human story, humans going to space. But we also want to tell that through the lens of the technology. Which technologies are enabling access to space for people as well as for science missions and cargo and things like that?
So you've got this magnificent Yuri Gagarin training suit.
Yes.
And I get, like, when I see that CCCP on that helmet, I see that image of him just having landed on Earth from his first space flight. And it's so evocative. And we've come so far.
Absolutely. So we are really lucky to have these 2 incredible garments on display when you first walk in. They are both on loan to us. We're very grateful for that. So on the left, this is a pressure suit that Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space, wore in 1961 in the weeks leading up to his mission. He wore this while training. And on the right-hand side, we have this incredible Blue Origin flight suit that was worn by Katya Ecazarreta, the first Mexican-born woman in space, on her spaceflight in 2022. And so by comparing these 2 a pressure suit and a flight suit, you can learn so much about how spaceflight has changed. We have a graphic in here encouraging people to look closely. Adam, as you pointed out, the CCP, that immediately signals, okay, this is a government astronaut.
Right.
But on Katya's suit, we see the Blue Origin logo. And so we know that this is a private company that's sending astronauts into space. You can see how going to space at this point, we wanted to kit out the astronauts in every possible protective gear. And on the right, you can see after 60 years of spaceflight, enough has been learned that it's more of a shirt sleeve environment on these capsules. And so we really hope visitors will come in and be able to learn about how spaceflight has evolved by looking at these 2 garments.
And I would imagine people can't even tell looking at this. Inside there's all sorts of systems for keeping Gagarin safe. There are cage systems for adjusting the volume of the inflation.
Exactly.
It's a tremendous amount of engineering in there, and they've gone so much more streamlined because they know what they need to accommodate for.
Exactly. Although this garment too, it looks very sleek, but it has a lot of protective elements as well. So making sure that it's made out of fire retardant material.
Right.
And so it's really exciting for us when we bring in these objects on loan or to collect, because we are learning about the next generation of what people are wearing in space and seeing that there are moments of continuity as well as change.
Well, and a continuity you were telling me about off camera is that despite this one looking much sleeker, both of these are incredibly bespoke suits built precisely for the wearer that they were designed for.
Exactly. I mean, these are custom garments, and we know that fit matters in space because that's what keeps you safe. You don't want to be wearing something oversized and end up with a repeated strain injury, or you just want to be comfortable when you have your 4 minutes in microgravity, living out your life's dream. And so all of these garments are very carefully made to the measurements of the wearers.
Amazing. And in terms of what we do when we get there, I see you start at the beginning with maybe the farthest one away is space tourism, going there for recreation.
Exactly. So for as long as people have been going into space, there's been interest in going there for fun, not just for government missions. And so throughout the gallery, we have these areas where we highlight moments in popular culture that connect directly to the themes that we're talking about with our objects. So up here, we actually have reproduced a reservation card that Hilton Hotels released in jest in the 1960s.
They released this, oh my God,
yes,
that's beautiful.
And so it's sort of giving this sense that there is a cultural awareness. As soon as humans are going to space, well, maybe one day this is for all of us.
Right. I can imagine the executives sitting around a table going, we're going to be there. We want to establish that we'll be there when you get there.
Exactly, yes.
Amazing. And you've got some really amazing commercial spacecraft over here to take a look at.
Absolutely.
I recognize this thing.
Yes. So this is a mock-up of the Blue Origin crew capsule. And as you'll note, things that have flown in space often look a little bit gritty. They look like they've lived a life.
Clean.
It is clean because it's a mock-up that's on loan to us from Blue Origin, and they have promised that when this when RSS First Step, their crew capsule retires, it will be replaced. It'll come into this gallery and replace the mock-up.
So you guys will just open up the roof and they'll parachute it in?
You know what? We have experts to figure that out. Luckily, I'm not one of them, but I trust them fully. And it'll be really incredible to have a flight suit that was worn in the vehicle, right? Paired next to each other. And so this is really where we get the human and the technology stories, and they really complement each other.
And the current commercial space race that is ongoing, we're all witnessing this, is yielding huge advances in terms of making things lighter, smaller, faster, cheaper. We've got a couple of rocket engines here.
Absolutely. And so one of the major themes of spaceflight today and in the future is lowering costs to access space. And we know we can do that in a few ways. One of the ways is by reusing technology. It's a lot cheaper to reuse what you have than build something from scratch.
And the early Apollo missions, they were sort of at each stage that they didn't need anymore. They were just chucking it into the ocean as the ship left Earth's gravity well.
Exactly. And we're very lucky to have some of the recovered F1 engines upstairs in our Destination Moon Gallery. But you won't find that for contemporary spaceflight because these vehicles are landing back on Earth and being reused. And so we have a flown SpaceX Merlin engine here to the left. And we also have a 3D printed Rutherford engine.
This thrills me that these guys can print these in 24 hours.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Wow, it's so hard to imagine. And yet these bring payloads to space safely and reliably. And so this is the kind of direction when people are thinking contemporary spaceflight, they need to be thinking reusability. Right. That's a hallmark. And as I mentioned before, it's not enough just to reuse a vehicle, but we want to make sure that we're reusing all parts of it. And so you mentioned Apollo is just jettisoning things as they're launching. And so we have a flown grid fin here. The grid fin is a technology that's used on the Merlin engines that can help the vehicle land back on a drone ship or on a landing pad.
Now, so this is something that I wasn't deeply familiar with before I walked into this gallery this morning, and it blows my mind because you also have a tactile display over here. That this helps adjust the landing rocket with a passive fin rather than active. Every active rocket is another failure point. So I know that commercial space is always going to want to remove everything like that can. This is so brilliant, and the practical demonstration of it is so clear, it blows my mind.
Yes, well, I remember from my college engineering classes, the mantra, keep it simple, stupid, KISS.
Yes.
And so sometimes complexity is the answer, but sometimes simplicity is as well. And so throughout all of our galleries at the Air and Space Museum, we really want to create opportunities for learners of all different styles to really connect with our content. And we know a lot of people learn by touch. They're doers, they're makers. And so we have this interactive of a grid fin. Folks can press this button and feel air come up.
You can feel how this directionalizes. Oh, that's
exactly.
Great.
Yes.
Oh my God, I can't wait to find out how a 10-year-old can break that.
Yes, we'll have to take bets on when it takes place.
This is so cool because when this is going, you can really feel exactly how much force it can apply to the landing.
Yes, and each rocket has multiple grid fins. Right. So you can get a sense of being able to control in all the directions.
And this one here, this is flown. This is actually used to land.
Exactly. And so whenever we have an object in here that's flown, we try to show video of that object in action on our presentation screen. So we know it's hard to see this and understand how it actually fits into the larger technology. So we've created opportunities for visitors to see things working as an entire system.
I'm curious when you receive an object like this also because it is filthy with the results of its purpose. As conservators, there's some of the dirt you want to remove because it will keep deteriorating and others you don't. How long does that process take? I mean, it must be object by object.
It's object by object, and our conservation team is so incredible at making those decisions, and they'll reach out to the curators as well for consultation, but ultimately they want to stabilize the object so that it doesn't continue to deteriorate, but we want to see the objects of wear and tear. So if you give us something, please don't clean it before you donate it, because we love to see evidence of its life.
I remember, I remember in Japanese swords that all the information you need to know about them is inside the handle, and what people will do is buy them and scrub them clean, and you're removing all this history when you clean it. There's a nice dirty rocket bell here.
Yes.
This is also flown.
Exactly. So this is a rocket engine that powered VSS Unity, Virgin Galactic's first generation spaceplane, to suborbital space.
And it's a fundamentally different design and construction of an engine than the SpaceX or the Rocket Labs.
That's right. So whereas the SpaceX and the Rocket Lab engines are launching vertically from the ground, the Virgin Galactic spaceplane is actually brought to altitude under a carrier aircraft. It is released, and then the rocket engine fires from approximately 50,000 feet.
I'm astounded at the breadth of history, engineering, and culture we've just covered in this 10-minute walk.
Yes, it is an immense amount that we want to cover, and yet there's still more. The story continues to unfold. So we're very lucky to have a presentation stage here in the gallery where we'll be able to invite in experts who can talk about what's happening next in spaceflight.
Okay, Matt, this is really like the locus of pop culture here. I see bits from Star Wars, from The Expanse. Talk to me about this gallery, this part of the gallery.
Yeah, so, one of the things we really wanted to try and get at in terms of the questions we think people should be engaged with in thinking about the future was this question of why, right? Like, what are our motivations for wanting to do things in space? And also this idea that people are already interacting with these ideas, these questions in their daily lives. So we tried to pick things that were, so in some cases, toys, movie posters, pieces of popular culture, some actual space artifacts as well to mix in with those, to let people kind of think about how, oh yeah, when I played with that lunar playset when I was a kid, I was actually exploring the idea of putting people on the moon and thinking about why they would be there. Would they be there to fight aliens? Would they be there to do science, right? Each of these artifacts represents a different kind of form of motivation. And so, we had a lot of fun putting together these artifacts, picking out things from our own collection, but then also collecting a few new things, borrowing some things from other museums and individuals that we could put on display. It's just some really cool stuff.
So this is where I'm curious about the curation process, where I'm assuming you understand the original size of your room that you're filling. Then you have this idea that you want to have this part of it. And then you want to populate this. Then you come up with an idea of a size for the population. How long, what is the process by which you boil down a list of an impossibly large number of things down to this amount?
Well, it was a long process. I think we were working on this gallery for probably 5 years total. I think we started in late 2018. We developed a sort of wish list that we started with lots of stuff on it. Some stuff we already had, some stuff we didn't know if we could get. And then as we started working with the designers on the actual physical layout of this gallery and how many cases there would be, how large the cases would be, that also sort of changed over time as the requirements of the gallery changed depending on budget and other things. So finally, towards the last couple of years of working on the gallery, we knew exactly how big the case would be. And we started really playing around with the layouts of the objects. And
do you guys do that? You do that, I'm sure, visually, but also do you have physical models you play around with?
Yeah, so we do have 3D models of a lot of stuff. And we have folks in the museum who specialize in scanning the objects and then giving us ways of moving them around.
Oh, nice.
Also, sometimes it's just sort of cutting and pasting on just flat diagrams of the objects, figuring out what will fit where. So, I mean, we have an incredible team of people that we work with. And our designer, Ashley Hornish, actually, she came up with the real arrangement of these objects and figured out what would go where without blocking anything, right?
Amazing.
Because we wanted the case to feel full, but not crowded.
Right. And I notice you have almost there's no labels in here.
Yeah, we don't have any labels except the label that tells you to look at this kiosk.
And that's new.
Yeah, so we've never done anything quite like this where we didn't put any labels in the case. Instead, we put all of the information into a digital kiosk that you can navigate on your own as a visitor. So when you use this kiosk, you get to decide what theme or what motivation you want to look at.
It begins with your reason for going to space that you might be curious about.
Exactly. So if you want to answer scientific questions in space, it's going to take you through a list of objects that are in this gallery that represent that motivation.
Gotcha.
And some objects show up in multiple areas because they might express more than one thing. But so we take you on a journey through the objects in the case to show you what relates to that theme. And so, we think this is an interesting way, and we're really excited to see how visitors actually use this. But for us, this was an interesting way to do something new with objects rather than just having labels on the wall, but rather incorporating them into these sort of longer narrative stories.
Margaret, I love seeing all of these cultural artifacts in this beautiful display. Tell me about this ride on Shuttle.
I just love this. So I was delighted when the team was asking me what could we put in here that would really engage with the fact that these are questions we're all thinking about all the time, whether it's television or movies, comic strips, toys. And so this is a ride on Space Shuttle toy that was made for toddlers. Comes from the 1980s, so classic Space Shuttle. It says Challenger on the side of it. And it came to us, a gentleman wrote to us who is a Vietnamese American whose family runs Asian grocery stores in Oklahoma City, where his family came, and which has a very high Vietnamese American population. And he was going through their warehouse as they were getting ready for an anniversary and pulled this out and remembered it as a kid when he was around the store when his parents were running it, and just wanted to know if we would be interested in this as another way. When they were the import-export business, they were bringing these toys in from China. And so kind of everyone was getting in on the imagine yourself in space game. And this was a way that even a little kid could imagine themselves as a part of the Space Shuttle program. And I love it. It has a little CB radio essentially attached to it, which is kind of a little nonsensical, but not very playable, very fun. And it's a just very American story to be able to talk about this immigrant family that was servicing this community with food that was both familiar and something that Americans would also want. And then they were looking at bringing this very American vehicle, this very American toy.
I love this. I mean, I was a kid in the late 70s and the early 80s, so I remember Space Shuttle fever. I remember, first there was Skylab fever. Then there was Space Shuttle fever. And the very idea of this person just thinking of the Smithsonian.
Yes, and his wife works in the aerospace industry, so the story makes itself in terms of how that inspiration from the 1980s then can turn into people who are the builders and makers of today.
I think also people might be surprised that the Smithsonian is agile enough to receive a call from someone like that and say, yes, that does belong in our collection.
Especially for the social and cultural objects, that is really my job as the curator of that collection. I get emails from people, would I be interested? And it's not always, but very often if people are super eager to give me something, it's sometimes not necessarily the most valuable thing. And incredibly valuable things. People are like, I don't know if you would want it. And I'm like, yes, definitely. This just tells so many stories that really enrich the collection. So I was delighted to get to work with Matt and Emily as the curators in this gallery as they were thinking about new objects that they were bringing into the collection, and to be able to say, oh, have I got one for you? I've got this that's in process right now.
I'm going to try and phrase this in a way that makes sense, but I love this room for how much it deals with the confluence of culture and engineering and science.
Yes.
But I also am fascinated by how much the Smithsonian itself as an institution can have its own mind expanded by what the public who attends it thinks it can be.
Yes, very much so. And I think that interdisciplinarity, that those conversations between different parts that really overlap more than you think, is a real part of what makes this so rich. And I like this because I think our visitors are going to come in, and the idea of this gallery is you're the conversation.
Right.
We're not talking at you. We want you to talk to each other, and we're trying to put these things in front of you so that you'll say, oh, I had one of those, or
Yes.
oh, I wanted one of those. And be able to then really have that conversation happening here.
Amazing, because all the engineers who built the robots and the ships that we're looking at in other parts of this gallery started out as toddlers on a space shuttle talking to NASA's mission control on
Yes.
their CB.
Very much so. And I think that if we can do that and really engage that next generation, but also the folks who have been dreaming this for years.
I love that you collect not just the stories of the objects and the stories that they kicked forward, but also the stories of the person who gave you the object and their history.
I love that. That's the best part of my job.
Amazing. So Matt, these are examples of the touchable habitats.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I mean, I just love seeing them like this, but I'm curious about, it must be a fraught enterprise to have things that the public can touch. The public can be, I'm imagining, quite destructive.
Well, yeah, I mean, our visitors are very enthusiastic. They, if you give them something to touch, they will touch it. And, they will apply some force at sometimes. The kids absolutely love to see how sturdy things are. So, yeah, everything we put in the galleries has to be, completely sturdy.
I'm assuming also if the public is touching these, that being able to clean them every day and not have that be part of their deterioration is also a consideration.
Yeah. We clean every gallery every day. So, yeah, they have to be able to hold up to any kind of cleaning solvents, and also to, the oils and acids on your fingers, right?
And you actually have some examples of the real stuff here, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And so the other thing that you'll see also is that there's Braille here. So the whole idea behind this section of the gallery wasn't just let's give the public something to touch. It's let's build this with accessibility first. And by doing that, you build something that everyone can appreciate, right?
Right.
And so this is really built with that in mind, working with some of Smithsonian's accessibility experts.
That is really, really, really cool. So it's just this whole environment of being able to feel the terrain, the topography. And
then to feel the real thing that the thing would be made of. So this is actually heat-sintered basalt.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Which is so deceptively smooth. It makes it seem like
it really, because it's like kind of almost like a glass-like
you'd expect it to be more porous, but it's very polished.
Tell me about this beautiful, beautiful brick.
Yeah, so that is heat-sintered basalt. So this was something that was made by the Pacific International Space Center for Exploration Systems. It's easier to say as Pisces. A group in Hawaii that's been working on various space projects, but one of the things they've been doing is using Hawaiian basalt, lava rock, which is very similar to what you'll find on Mars or the Moon.
Gotcha.
To make bricks and launch pad tiles and other materials that could potentially be used on the Moon or Mars. So this is an interlocking brick made out of basalt.
So instead of a 3D printed structure, you would have a machine that would make many of these, and you'd be able to tinker toy.
It'd be a little bit more like conventional brick construction than the 3D printing, but it produces very solid materials that you can make just with what's there.
Let's say your grandmother is coming to town and you're going to bring her to this gallery to show her what you're proud of. Is there something we haven't talked about?
Oh my gosh. Well, there is one. If it's a family member, I'm going to show my object that's on display, actually.
Show me.
So when we wanted to represent like the cultural aspects of going to space and thinking about space flight, one of the like hallmark experiences that I thought of was space camp.
Yeah.
So if you're a kid of the 90s or early 2000s, you would have seen on Nickelodeon, Space Camp is the grand prize for any of their game shows.
Totally.
And so that was my generation. And I ended up going to Space Camp when I was in grad school as part of my research.
Amazing.
It was so fun. And I built a model rocket. And so as we were thinking about how to represent culture engagement with space, we decided to talk about Space Camp. And so my object is here on loan on the right.
That's your rocket from Space Camp.
It is made in 2017. And What's really fun to me is that it's not really about my rocket, but this represents more than 1 million people who have gone through the Space Camp program and built their own model rockets, and what it meant to them to save up money, take time away from work or school, and come and do this because space matters that much to people. You know, when we think about what the space industry looks like, it is those people. It is the Space Camp counselors. It is the folks who work on communications for these different companies. It's space historians, right? The space ecosystem is so large and our lives intersect with it in active and passive ways. And so we hope people will see themselves in this exhibit and think about how they connect with space.
That's really thrilling. Thank you. Okay, I hope you get a glimpse in why I think this exhibit is so important. I'm going to zoom out for a second and tell you, I think most people tend to put engineers and scientists into a bucket of like methodically thinking people and dry and not very humorous, and artists in this like we're quirky and we're creative kind of category. Knowing artists and engineers and scientists, that stereotype doesn't hold up for any group of 3 of any of those. It is a complete fiction. The fact is, everyone does what they do when they do it at a super high level because they were inspired. Do you know that almost every Nobel Prize winner also has an interest in music or painting or some art form that is not germane to their science? We've just covered a whole bunch of amazing ingenuity and engineering, and I'm going to take a wild-ass guess that the vast majority of engineers and scientists that worked on those innovations got some of their early inspiration in this very building, and that is why this building is here. And so I leave a room like this with goosebumps about what's possible and what other people can think is possible, because when this exhibit opens in 3 weeks, a kid is going to walk through here within the first week that is going to end up having a career in science or engineering or something that gives them a passion that they found in this place. And they're going to make the world a better place because they applied that passion. That's why I think this is important.